She had been a cat for 11 hours. The sky over Little Whinging had gone from the pale grey of a Sunday afternoon to the full black of a November night, and Minerva McGonagall had spent every minute of it on a garden wall, watching. The house at number 4 was quiet. She had arrived at dawn and spent the day observing the family within with the careful, unsparing attention that 20 years of teaching had honed into something very close to dread. The man was loud. The woman was thin-lipped and watchful in the way of someone who expected to be wronged. The boy, large, pink, intermittently squalling, had been passed between them like an object of uncertain value. These were not, she had concluded within the first hour, people who would be kind to a child who was not theirs. She was still thinking about that when Albus Dumbledore appeared at the far end of the street. He was unmistakable, tall, silver-bearded, his robes catching the orange glow of the street lamps and shimmering faintly. He walked slowly. Albus Dumbledore had never been in a hurry in his life. He came to a stop at the wall where Minerva was sitting and regarded her with the expression she knew well. Gentle, exhausted, already aware of what she was about to say. She transformed. The silver tabby became a woman in tartan, and she did not bother with pleasantries. "How long have you known?" she asked. He seemed to consider his hands rather than her. "Since midnight," he said. "I had certain information." "I came as soon as I was sure." The night was cold enough that she could see his breath. Around them, Privet Drive was entirely asleep. The entire Muggle world was continuing in its ordinary way, unaware that it had spent 11 years dancing on the edge of catastrophe, and that the catastrophe had arrived and been in a fashion survived. The name still felt like pressing a bruise. "For now," said Dumbledore. "Not permanently, but yes, he is gone." She looked at the house. Number 4. A recently washed car in the drive, which struck her as entirely the wrong thing to have spent one Sunday doing. "You're going to send him here," she said. It was not a question. She had known it before she sat down on the wall. "Lily's sacrifice created a protection tied to her blood," Dumbledore said. "Petunia Dursley is her only living blood relative. While Harry returns here each year until he comes of age, the protection holds. While Voldemort's supporters remain at large, these are not people who will love him." The silence that followed had a weight to it. "No," Dumbledore said finally. "They are not." "That is not a small thing, Albus." "I know," and something in his voice had the quality of a man who had chosen the lesser of two harms and knew precisely what that choice was costing him. "I know it is not." She said nothing. She understood his calculation. The blood protection was the strongest magic available, and the child's survival tonight was itself testament to something extraordinary already working in his favor. The trouble was that Dumbledore sometimes believed in extraordinary protections more than he believed in ordinary love. She was not sure he was wrong to. She was not sure he was right. She looked at the curtained windows and thought about all the years that would pass inside them. A child growing up, uncertain and unloved, never knowing what he was, and felt something cold settle in her chest that had nothing to do with the November air. She was still standing there when she heard the engine. Hagrid came down out of the dark like a piece of weather. The motorbike, Sirius's motorbike, which meant Sirius had been at Godric's Hollow first, settled onto the road with a sound like gravel under a large boot. Hagrid himself was vast and red-eyed, his dark hair in disorder, and he was carrying a bundle in his enormous arms with the exaggerated care of someone who had decided that, if he moved carefully enough, the worst thing that had happened tonight might somehow unhappen. The bundle was asleep. Hagrid held the child out, and Dumbledore took him. Harry Potter's face appeared from the folds of the blanket. James's face already, that dark hair, and a scar that should not have been there, livid and new against the infant's forehead. "He didn't wake," Hagrid said, his voice barely holding. "Not once. Slept through all of it after." Dumbledore adjusted his hold on Harry with the careful precision of a man who did not often hold children and was aware of it. He looked down at the face. His own face did something complicated that Minerva had rarely seen it do. "Where is Sirius?" she asked. Hagrid's expression told her before his words could. She had thought she was past the worst of the night's news. She had been wrong. Earlier that same morning, before the street lamps came on, before any of this Sirius Black had caught up to Peter Pettigrew on a London street. He had been to Godric's Hollow first. He had found what was left, the collapsed wall, the nursery open to the November sky, James in the hallway. He had knelt beside him. He had said his name. Then he had stood, and he had handed Harry to Hagrid and said, "Take him. Take care of him." And he had gotten back on the motorbike and gone to find the man responsible, because it was the only thing left to do. Peter was in Charing Cross Road, furtive, small, wearing his guilt like a coat he couldn't shed. "Sirius," Pettigrew said in that particular voice, the voice of a man cornering himself before anyone else could. "I'm sorry I should have. I'm so sorry. You told him where they were," Sirius said. "I was afraid he would have killed me." "James is dead," Sirius said, "because you were afraid." What happened next happened quickly. Pettigrew threw his arms wide and screamed, loud enough that windows opened up and down the street, that faces appeared, and the explosion that followed took out the pavement and the lamp-post and 12 people who had had the misfortune to be nearby. When the smoke cleared, there was one finger on the ground, just the one, and Peter Pettigrew was gone. Sirius was standing in the center of the destruction, and he was laughing. He would not be able to explain it. The Aurors arrived 3 minutes later, and he did not resist them. He was still laughing when they took him away. Hours later, across the city, Remus Lupin sat at a kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold. He had been there since the first reports came through the wireless. Voldemort defeated, the Potters dead, the boy who lived, and he had been sitting because it was the only thing he could manage. James was dead, Lily was dead. He had processed both as sentences. He had not yet processed them as facts. He was not certain he had the equipment for it. Then the wireless said, "Sirius Black arrested. 12 Muggles dead. Pettigrew killed in the blast." He sat with it for a long time. Sirius, who had loved James like his own bones. Sirius, who had given Hagrid the motorbike to get Harry safe, and then gone after the man responsible. Yes, that was entirely the shape of it. That was what Sirius would do. And still the wireless was saying 12 dead, and Pettigrew killed, and Remus was finding it very difficult to breathe. 12 dead, 1 finger found. That detail stopped him. He went back to it the way you go back to a word that doesn't pass in a sentence. 1 finger. Not a body. Not bones. Not ashes. 1 finger, and an explosion large enough to be blamed for everything. And Peter Pettigrew was gone. Remus knew what Peter was. He was one of 4 people alive who knew it, or had been, before tonight took 2 of them. They had done something extraordinary and foolish in their 5th year at Hogwarts. 3 boys becoming animagi because their friend was a werewolf, and frightened and alone, and they had wanted to be with him. James had been a stag. Sirius had been a great black dog. Peter had been small and brown and quick, with bright eyes and an instinct for vanishing. Peter's form was a rat. A rat did not leave a body. A rat cut off 1 finger, transformed, and left the world convinced it was dead. Remus was on his feet before he had decided to stand. He left the cold tea and the wireless and went out into the November dark, and he did not stop until he reached the street where Dumbledore still stood, holding a sleeping child whose parents were gone and whose godfather was in ministry custody and whose fate was not yet decided. Remus found them exactly where he'd expected, standing in the middle of a muggle street, Dumbledore tall and silver in the lamplight, McGonagall beside him with her arms folded and her jaw set. Between them, held in Dumbledore's arms with the careful stiffness of a man unaccustomed to the weight, was a small and sleeping bundle that Remus did not let himself look at yet. He had run most of the way here. He stopped in front of them, breathing harder than he usually allowed himself to. "Peter is alive," he said. Dumbledore looked at him, not dismissively. Albus Dumbledore had never dismissed a person in his life. It was part of what made him genuinely frightening, but with the careful attention of someone who had spent a century learning to assess the quality of what was being brought to him. "Tell me why," Dumbledore said. So Remus told him. "The finger. An animagus form is a rat. A rat does not leave a body. A rat leaves one finger if it is careful, if the explosion is large enough." McGonagall, who had spent the day watching the Dursley house with doubts she hadn't yet had the chance to voice, said, "He's right. Just that. He's right." And the way she said it, with the certainty of a woman prepared to believe almost anything about the people involved, made Dumbledore's shoulders shift, almost imperceptibly, as if something had settled in him. "If Pettigrew is alive," Dumbledore said slowly, "where is he?" "Wherever he wants to be," Remus said. "He's a rat. He's small. He could be anywhere in Britain by now." He paused. "But if you want evidence not of where Pettigrew is now, but of what he was, there's only one place left to look." He told them about Regulus. Sirius's younger brother had been a Death Eater, who recanted in 1979 and died for it. He had lived at 12 Grimmauld Place. Whatever he had known about Voldemort's inner circle, whatever he had written down before the end, might still be in that house. McGonagall said, "You're suggesting we search a dead man's room." "I'm suggesting," Remus said, "that a dead man might have left something we need." Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Then he raised his wand, and a silver phoenix materialized in the cold night air. Enormous, unhurried, its light falling over all of them before it took the shape of his message and vanished. The ministry official responsible for Sirius's case had in the last hour ordered the prisoner processed immediately. No hearing, no trial, directly to Azkaban. The Patronus was Dumbledore's counter. Hold the case. As chief warlock of the Wizengamot, he had the authority to delay any ministry proceedings pending an emergency investigation. It was not an acquittal. It was a pause, and a pause was all Remus needed. "The official will contest this," McGonagall said. "Yes," said Dumbledore. "He will, and by the time he has made himself heard, we will have either found something or we will not." He looked at Remus. "If we find nothing, the pause ends, and there is nothing more I can do. You understand this." Remus understood it. He had understood it before he came. 12 Grimmauld Place was not a house that welcomed intrusion. Warburger Black had been its mistress for longer than most ministry officials had been alive, and she received the 2 Aurors Dumbledore had dispatched with the contempt of a woman whose family had never needed an external authority to tell it what to do. She had the bearing of someone who had not been asked to do anything against her will in several decades. Tonight she was being asked, and she made her opinion known in a series of remarks the Aurors would later decline to document in their official report. She was legally compelled. The door opened. Creature watched from the upper landing. He was an ancient elf, small and grey, his ears large and bat-like, his eyes red at the rims with something that had been weeping for 2 years and had not quite stopped. His master was dead. Regulus was dead. He had obeyed Regulus's last command to the letter, returned home, said nothing, kept the secret. He had been keeping it for 2 years, and now the ministry was in the house, and Creature could see no way to help his master's memory, and no way to hinder these people that Regulus, careful, precise Regulus, who had always been particular about what was right, would have approved of. He did not help, he did not hinder, he watched. When the aura turned toward Regulus's room, Creature made a sound that was nearly words, and was not quite. He had kept that room exactly as Regulus had left it. The books in their order, the calendar on the wall, the writing case on the desk that he had dusted every week for 2 years without ever opening. Regulus's room had not been touched since 1979. It smelled of old paper and cold. The calendar was still open to August 1979, its dates unmarked, waiting for appointments that were never made. The bed was made with the precision of a room kept by someone who could not let it go. His desk was clear, except for the writing case latched shut, pushed to one side as if he had meant to come back to it. The Auror found the document in the writing case, underneath 3 sealed letters addressed to Regulus's mother, never sent, probably never finished, and a pressed flower of a kind the Auror didn't recognize and didn't try to. The document itself was a single sheet of parchment, written in a careful, slanted hand. No salutation, no addressee, just a list of names in a column, with notes beside each one. The handwriting was steady for the first 12 names. It became less steady toward the end, as if the writer's composure had worn thin, partway down Peter Pettigrew. The note beside his name described, in 3 precise sentences, how Pettigrew had been extracting information about Order of the Phoenix safe houses and passing it through intermediaries to Voldemort. The date at the top was 1978, written before the war's worst escalation, at a point when this knowledge could have changed everything. Regulus had known, he had written it down. And then he had died, alone, at 17 or 18 years old, and the document had stayed in a writing case in an unvisited room for 2 years. The Aura sent a Patronus. The document reached Dumbledore while he was still standing in the street. The Muggle sky had begun to lighten at its edges, grey separating from black. Hagrid sat on the garden wall of number 4 with his chin in his hands. McGonagall stood beside Dumbledore in silence. The baby was still asleep. Dumbledore read the document once, quietly, in the lamplight. Then he read it again. He had not investigated the marauders. It had not occurred to him that the spy could be one of James's closest friends, because James had trusted them, and Dumbledore had trusted James's judgment, and Sirius had proposed Pettigrew, and Dumbledore had accepted it. He had accepted a great deal on the strength of other people's certainty in one another, and he had been wrong every step of the way from there to Godric's Hollow, and now a dead boy's document found in a cold room by an Auror, who had never met Regulus Black, was telling him so. He had been wrong about the people. He had not been wrong about the magic. The blood protection was real and extraordinary and would have held. But he had been wrong about the people surrounding Harry, and about what that wrongness had cost, and about the shape of everything that followed. Baby Harry stirred in the crook of his arm and made a small sound and went still again. "Not here," Dumbledore said. McGonagall looked at him. "Not this house, not tonight." He folded the document and placed it inside his robes. "I will take him to Hogwarts while the hearing is arranged. The castle is not a home, but it is safe, and it gives us time." He looked at number 4-1 last time. The curtains were still drawn. The Dursleys were asleep, unaware that anything had been near them in the night at all. She will never know he was here. Remus did not sleep. He spent the remainder of the night on a bench in Dumbledore's office, watching Harry sleep in a conjured crib beside the window. 11 months old, and you have survived something that should have killed you. Your parents are dead, and your godfather is in a ministry holding cell, and the man who helped put him there is alive somewhere, small and hiding. Harry slept through all of it. The blood protection Dumbledore had planned for Privet Drive did not activate. The enchantment that would have woven itself through the blood of Lily Potter's sister, tying Harry to that house, to that street, to that particular species of safe and loveless life, it did not come into being. Not tonight. Something else would have to hold him. The cold was the first thing they taught you about Dementors, but the cold was not the worst of it. Sirius had been in ministry holding for roughly 36 hours. The outer corridor was not Azkaban. He understood that, in the part of him still capable of understanding things, but Dementors did not require a formal prison to do their work. Each pass left something behind, a smear of cold with nothing to do with temperature, a pulling sensation, as if the worst moment of his life were being held up to the light one at a time. Godric's Hollow. James in the hallway, the smell of smoke. Peter's face, already rearranging itself into something prepared in the moment before the explosion. He focused on anger. Anger had edges, and he could hold on to them. Grief was a hole. He'd known that since he was 16, and had been very careful about it. Ever since, somewhere down the hall a woman was shouting. Past language, past syllables, just sound. He would learn later who it was and what she had done. At the time he thought, they're keeping someone in worse shape than me, and that was enough. He worked with it until the holding cell door opened, and they took him to the hearing. The Wizengamot chamber was larger than it needed to be and colder than the November outside. 50 members in plum robes occupied tiered seats in a horseshoe, and Dumbledore sat at the high bench with the posture of a man who had presided over very difficult things before and expected to preside over them again. Sirius was placed in a chair in the center of the floor, no chains, which meant they were not certain enough to be contemptuous. He noted this. He found Remus in the gallery first, and Remus gave him a look that said something had changed since yesterday. Something found, not hope, exactly. Remus did not permit himself hope before the evidence was in, but not nothing either. Remus John Lupin, Dumbledore said, you have asked to address this body as a witness. You understand you are speaking under oath. I understand. Remus stood and told them about 5th year at Hogwarts. He told it plainly, without softening, because softening would have made it sound like he was asking for something. 3 of his closest friends had become unregistered animagi because he was a werewolf and 17 and frightened, and they had wanted to be with him. James Potter had been a stag. Sirius Black had been a large black dog. Peter Pettigrew had been a rat, small and brown and quick, with bright eyes and an instinct for vanishing into spaces too small for anything walking upright. A murmur went through the tiered seats. Dumbledore let it run its course before raising a hand. A man, in the form of a rat, does not leave a body, Remus continued. He severs one finger, transforms, and leaves. The witnesses in Charing Cross Road saw an accusation and an explosion. They did not see Peter Pettigrew die. No body was recovered. There was a finger. The head of DMLE said, you are asking this body to set aside 50+ witness testimonies on the basis of a theory about Animachus transformation. I am asking this body to consider what 50 witnesses actually saw, Remus said. And there is more. The document came through the official evidence channel, a single sheet of parchment from Regulus Black's writing case at 12 Grimold Place, recovered by Aura's acting under emergency order from the Chief Warlock. It listed 23 names dated 1978. Beside the name Peter Pettigrew, in the careful, slanted hand of a boy who had believed he was writing something that would matter, 3 sentences named him as an Order infiltrator who had been passing safe house locations to Voldemort through intermediaries. The document established motive. Pettigrew had been a spy, a man who could transform into a rat, who had spent years cultivating a reputation for harmlessness, would not have been caught unprepared when Sirius came to find him. The head of DMLE said, "The document cannot be verified as authentic," Dumbledore said. "It has been submitted to the Magical Authentication Office. We are asking for a conditional acquittal pending verification. Do you oppose the legal mechanism or the document's contents?" A silence followed. The head of DMLE chose not to answer that question directly. McGonagall was in the public gallery. She was not a member of this body. Dumbledore called her as a character witness, and she had not expected it. Sirius could read this in her face. She spoke about what she knew of him, a student she had taught, an Order member she had worked alongside, a young man who had been catastrophically wrong in a way that had destroyed everything he loved. She did not make him sound blameless. She made him sound like someone who had paid for it. Sirius thought that was probably the most honest thing said about him all morning. The vote was not unanimous. Some of the 50 in plum robes had made up their minds in October and were not going to unmake them because a dead boy's document said otherwise. But it did not need to be unanimous. Dumbledore said, "Sirius Aurium Black, this body finds you not guilty. You are free to go." He had imagined what relief would feel like. What he felt was closer to the moment, after a very loud sound stops. Not peace. He went to where Dumbledore had taken Harry. Hogwarts was quiet in the way it only achieved when the students were not in it. A small sitting room off the headmaster's corridor, a fire already lit, a conjured crib beside the window. Sirius sat on the floor next to the crib. He didn't trust himself to pick Harry up without waking him. The dark hair, James's hair, down to the way it refused to lie flat. The scar on the forehead, livid and new, that should not have been there. "He has been well," Dumbledore said from the doorway. "He has been eating. He is not distressed. He's coming home with me," Sirius said. Dumbledore settled into the armchair. He explained the blood protection clearly. The ancient magic Lily's sacrifice had created the sanctuary that would have tied Harry to Petunia Dursley's home. Until he came of age, the certainty that Voldemort would return in some form and Harry would face it, eventually. He did not make it sound like a threat. He made it sound like a calculation, which was what it was. Sirius listened to all of it. "You're asking me to send him to people who will not love him," he said, "every year for 10 years. Against a danger that may not come for years. The blood protection, I know what it is." He looked at Harry, still asleep. "I know you're right that it would hold. I know Voldemort will return, and I may not be enough when he does." He looked up. "I also know what it costs to make the wrong call for what seem like the right reasons. I switched to the Secret Keeper because I thought I was being clever about risk, because I thought I was making him safer." He stopped. "I will not trade Harry's childhood for a hypothetical Albus. I'm not able to do it." The fire settled. A silence. "Then we compromise," Dumbledore said. "I will place every enchantment I know on wherever you live. I will remain involved. You will not disappear to a cottage and send me letters." He held Sirius's gaze. "And you understand that when Voldemort returns, not if what we can build together will be considerably less than what Lily made. You carry that." "I know," Sirius said. He carried Harry out of Hogwarts an hour later into the grey November cold. Marfed. Cake. He had no home. 12 Grimmauld Place belonged to his mother, who was alive and had made her feelings about her eldest son's existence comprehensively clear. He had Harry's parents' vault at Gringotts and a motorbike in Ministry Impound and Remus, who was waiting at the bottom of the stone steps, looking like a man who had not slept in 2 days and did not expect to sleep tonight either. Remus said, "He's coming with me." Remus looked at Harry, who was awake now, regarding the November sky with the wide and uncritical attention of an 11-month-old encountering the outside world. Harry made a small sound that was not quite a word, but communicated something. "Right," Remus said. "Then we'd better find somewhere to live." The flat had 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that did not drain properly, and a sitting room where someone had hung wallpaper in a pattern of small brown diamonds that had not improved the space. It was on the 3rd floor of a building in a quiet street, and it was theirs, which was the thing that mattered. Sirius had not known how to rent a flat. Remus had done it. He had a particular talent for appearing ordinary, plain clothes, careful speech, a handshake that conveyed the impression he paid his bills on time and made no noise after 10 o'clock, which was, Sirius reflected, entirely accurate for 3 weeks of every 4. Harry arrived in the flat at 14 months, hauled in the car seat Remus had acquired from somewhere. He had a gift for acquiring things Sirius didn't know they needed until they appeared. The flat became, with a speed that surprised Sirius, a place where someone small lived. Small boots by the door. A collection of objects deemed safe to grip and throw. A very small chair that Harry could pull himself up on, and then stand beside, and then use to traverse the sitting room from end to end like a mountaineer working the ridge. Sirius was 22. He knew NEWT-level transfiguration and 6 distinct methods of improper use of a motorbike and a comprehensive set of marauder techniques for getting where he was not supposed to be and not being caught there. He had not read a single book about infant development. Remus had read 3. This was, Sirius came to understand, going to be the shape of it. Sirius would manage the flying catches and the reckless good humor, and the certainty that Harry was the cleverest child in Britain, and Remus would read the books and tell him that 14-month-olds were not actually supposed to be flying yet, not even briefly, and Sirius would agree and mean it for approximately 2 weeks. Harry's accidental magic arrived in the way of most things Harry did, suddenly, without warning, and with complete conviction. He startled at a loud noise from the street, and a cup Sirius had left on the edge of the table flew off and hit the wall. He was delighted by this. The cup was not damaged, which meant it had been steered rather than flung. Sirius looked at Remus. Remus looked at Sirius. They agreed without speaking, not to encourage this, yet they encouraged it a little. The full moon was a structural fact of the household. Remus did not speak about it as a difficulty. He spoke about it as a schedule. 4 days before, he was tired and short-tempered in a way that he controlled carefully and apologized for after. 3 days before, he packed a bag. 2 days before, he left. He had a place. He would not say where, and Sirius did not ask, because Remus had been managing this since he was 4 years old and had earned the right to his own method. He came back 3 or 4 days after the moon, moving carefully, with the particular pallor of someone who has put their body through something it was not designed for. The wolfsbane potion that would have made it manageable did not exist, would not exist for another decade, by Sirius's best estimate, and possibly longer. In the meantime, there was Remus's method, and there was the space between the method's edges, which was Sirius alone, with a 14-month-old in a flat with difficult wallpaper he managed. Each month's full moon was a small exam. He passed each one badly by any objective standard. Harry ate something off the floor that one time. There was an incident with the stairs that Sirius would not recount, and passed it adequately by the standard that mattered, which was that Harry was consistently fine. The first word came in March. Harry was standing at his small chair navigating the sitting room, and Remus had been back for 2 days and was on the sofa reading, and Harry reached the end of his route and turned and looked directly at Remus and said, with great clarity, "Mooney!" Remus put the book face down. He looked at Harry. Harry looked at him. Sirius, from the kitchen, said, "Did he just?" "Yes," Remus said. There was a pause. Sirius appeared in the doorway. He looked at Harry, who was very pleased with himself. Then Sirius started laughing, the kind that comes up from somewhere involuntary, and Remus started laughing, and Harry, who did not know what was funny, but understood that this was the desired response, laughed too, holding onto his small chair and looking between them, as if he had discovered the best possible thing in the world. Dumbledore came in May. He appeared at the door with his hat and his robes, and his particular quality of taking up more space than his height accounted for. And Harry, who had no context for being afraid of anything yet, held both arms out and demanded to be picked up. Dumbledore picked him up with the manner of a man who did not often hold children and was aware of it, and Harry grabbed a handful of silver beard, and Dumbledore bore this with patience. He checked the enchantments he had placed on the flat, walked each room once, slowly, with his wand held at his side. Then he sat, still holding Harry, who had begun to investigate the pockets of his robes with growing enthusiasm. "The protections are holding," Dumbledore said. "Good," Sirius said. A silence that was polite about what it contained. They had the same disagreement every time Dumbledore visited, about the blood protection, about the Dursleys' house that Harry would never sleep in, about whether Sirius had made the right call. It had grown quieter over the months. It had not stopped. "The prophecy still stands," Dumbledore said. "Whatever happens with Voldemort's current state and his disembodied state will not be permanent. The terms of the prophecy remain in force. He chose Harry. That is not undone." "I know," Sirius said. "You should know," Dumbledore said carefully, "but I have not told you its full text. I'm aware of that. I am telling you this so that you know it, not to discuss it tonight." He retrieved something from Harry's hand before it could go into Harry's mouth, and replaced it with a watch, which Harry accepted as an upgrade. The danger is not a general danger, it is specific, and when Voldemort returns, it will be specific to Harry. Sirius looked at Harry on Dumbledore's knee, entirely absorbed by the watch. "He's not quite 16 months old." "No," Dumbledore said. The Daily Prophet that came that week had the trial on the front page. 4 names, 2 photographs. Bellatrix Lestrange had been convicted, along with her husband, Rodolphus, her brother-in-law, Rabaston, and one other, for the torture of Frank and Alice Longbottom with the Cruciatus curse. Both auras had been driven to permanent insanity. The head of DMLE's public statement on the sentence was quoted at length. Bartemius Crouch, Jr., approximately 19, had been condemned by his own father. At the stand, the article described this in terms of civic courage. Sirius read this and understood the mechanism of it, a father making absolutely clear, publicly, that family loyalty had limits, and felt something cold and complicated about it that was not entirely sympathy. She had always been the most purely herself of all of them. No hesitation, no irony, no gap between what she believed and what she did. He had grown up 2 branches away from that on the family tapestry, and had spent his adolescence learning to be afraid of it. She was in Azkaban now. He turned the paper over and did not read the rest. That night, as he did every night, he sat on the edge of Harry's small bed and told him about his parents, not the horror of it. Harry knew about the scar. He touched it sometimes, looking in the mirror with the casual interest of someone exploring their own face. He would learn the rest when he was ready. Tonight was not for the rest. James had been the best flyer Sirius had ever seen, including professionals. He had eyes that could find the snitch from 50 yards in fog. He had laughed too loudly and apologized badly and been genuinely kind, in a way that took Sirius years to understand, was its own skill and not simply easy. Lily had been brilliant in the way that had nothing to do with being good at exams. She had understood things about people that most people spent their whole lives missing. She had kept all of them honest. She had been more than Harry's mother, but she had also been Harry's mother, and that was what mattered here. Harry listened. He was too small to understand the words. But he looked at Sirius's face while he spoke, with the wide, quiet attention of someone taking everything in. "That's who you are," Sirius said. "That's where you come from." Harry put his hand on Sirius's hand. Then he lay down and went to sleep. Outside, May made the streets look ordinary. In the flat, with the difficult wallpaper and the cup that had flown across the room, something that was not ordinary at all was being built, quietly, one night at a time. Walburga Black had died in 1985, and Sirius had inherited 12 Grimmauld Place the way you inherit a debt, legally, inescapably, with the awareness that you will eventually have to decide what to do about it. He had not moved in. He had visited twice, once to take legal possession, and once to confirm nothing had changed, cold, dark, draped in the old magic of a family that had believed hard in the same things for 7 centuries. He had done what he needed and left both times without going past the first-floor landing. In September of 1987, he took Harry. He was not sure, precisely, why he decided that year. He was old enough to hear things he had not been told yet, and Sirius had spent the summer with the awareness that there was a version of this conversation he was postponing, and that postponing it was its own kind of choice. There were things Harry deserved to know about where his godfather came from. They went on a Saturday in the early afternoon. Sirius unlocked the door and stood back. Harry went in first. He had always been difficult to startle. Even as an infant, he had received the unexpected with equanimity, as if the world's tendency to surprise him was just one of the world's habits, and he had accounted for it. He walked into the dark hall of 12 Grimmauld Place and looked at the peeling wallpaper and the mounted heads and the long row of gas lamps that had not been lit in 2 years, and said, "It smells like old things." "It is old things," Sirius said. "Is it ours?" "Legally. I haven't decided what to do with it yet." They moved through the ground floor. Harry looked at everything carefully, in the particular way he had of absorbing a new space. Not touching, not commenting, just looking. As if he were updating a map inside his head. The tapestry covered the whole wall. 7 centuries of the Black family, embroidered in gold thread on faded cloth, names and dates and connecting lines, generation after generation of the same narrow ideology rendered in careful needlework. Across the top, in letters that had once been picked out in silver, "Toujours pur," always pure. Harry read it and looked at Sirius. "That's them," Sirius said. "The family. That's what they believed in." Harry looked back at the tapestry. He was methodical about it, starting at the oldest names, working forward through the centuries. He was going to find it on his own, Sirius understood. He let him "That one," Harry said, pointing. "There's a burn mark." "That's me." Harry looked at him. "They burned me off when I was 16 and it became clear I wasn't going to be what they wanted." He said it without any particular feeling. He had had 22 years to get to a place where it was simply a fact. "It's the best thing they ever did for me." Harry looked at the scorch mark for a long moment. He didn't say anything yet. He turned back to the tapestry and kept looking. Creature appeared in the doorway of the drawing room, in the manner of all house elves appearing, suddenly and without a sound that announced him. He was ancient, small and grey, the loose skin of his arms hanging, his ears enormous, his eyes red at their rims, and he looked at Sirius with the particular expression of a creature who obeys because he has to, and who has made his feelings about this comprehensively clear through the quality of his obedience. "Show Harry around," Sirius said. Creature showed Harry around. He did it technically, opening each door and naming each room in the flattest voice available to him, and Harry thanked him after each one. This appeared to perplex Creature. By the third room, his flatness had acquired a quality of uncertainty, as if he were trying to work out what was being done to him. Harry was not doing anything to him. Harry had grown up watching Remus be dismissed by people who didn't know what to do with him, and he had absorbed a lesson from this without being taught it. He didn't dismiss anyone easily. In Regulus's room there was a photograph on the desk. It had been there since 1979. Creature had dusted around it. The young man in it was dark-haired and serious in the way of someone who had never quite got the hang of photographs. He kept trying to look as if he wasn't being looked at. "Who's that?" Harry asked. Sirius stood in the doorway. He had known this room was in the tour. He had not decided what to say about it, and now here was Harry, looking at his brother's photograph, and the decision had made itself. "That's your Uncle Regulus," he said. "My younger brother. He died before you were born." Harry looked at the photograph. The young man in it looked almost like Sirius, but less like someone who had ever found anything funny. What happened to him? He was a Death Eater. Voldemort sighed during the war. He paused. He changed his mind at the end. He did something that cost him his life, because he thought it was right. He looked at the photograph. The document, the one that helped free me from the ministry, it came from this room, from that desk. He wrote it down, and then he died, and it sat here for 2 years until someone came to look. Harry was quiet for a moment, looking at the photograph. "He saved you," he said. He didn't know he was doing it, but he did. Sirius looked at his brother's face in the silver frame. "Yes," he said, "something like that." Harry filed it away. Sirius could see, the moment he did, a particular stillness, the face going inward. He had done this since he was very small, received a piece of information, sorted it, and brought it back later with a question Sirius hadn't anticipated. Dumbledore came that afternoon. He and Sirius sat in the kitchen, the one room in the house that Creature kept habitable, while Harry read upstairs. Dumbledore's annual visit had become a known fixture of the year. He checked the enchantments, he stayed for tea. He and Sirius had a version of the same argument in whatever form it had taken since the last time. This year Sirius said, "I want to know what the prophecy actually says." Dumbledore looked at his tea. He had the expression of a man who had expected this, and who had been deciding for some time what to do about it. "I know it exists," Sirius said. "I know Voldemort chose Harry. I know there's more than that." "There is," Dumbledore said. "Then tell me." A silence. The kitchen was cold. Even in September, the house ran cold. "Not yet. What I can tell you is this. The power Harry has that Voldemort does not understand is real. It is in him. It was not built in Petunia Dursley's house. It was not built anywhere in particular. It was put there by Lily." I have thought a great deal over these past 6 years about whether I was right about the blood protection. And I think, Dumbledore said carefully, that you were also right. That what Harry needed, what shaped him, was love that was actually present. And that may turn out to matter as much as anything I could have enchanted. He did not say he had been wrong. He said, I am not as certain as I was. Sirius received this, did not say anything because it was the first time Dumbledore had said it, and there was something about the first time that deserved not to be pressed. Harry was alone in Regulus's room while they talked. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his uncle's photograph and sorted through what he knew. His parents had died fighting a dark wizard when he was 1 year old. A man named Pettigrew, who could become a rat, which Harry had always found interesting more than frightening, had betrayed them and was still somewhere out there. A dead uncle he had never met had written something down that mattered. He pressed his hand to his scar now. Nothing. He was 7 years old in a cold room in a house full of old magic, and he was not afraid. The weight of knowing had never felt like a burden to Harry. It felt like information. You could do things with information. He put the photograph back carefully. In the spot where it had been, they left in the early evening. Sirius locked the front door and stood on the pavement looking at the house. 12 Grimmauld Place looked back at him with all its windows and all its centuries. He was not ready to live in it. He did not know when he would be. The house would wait. It was very good at waiting. Can we come back? Harry asked. Sirius looked at him. Harry was looking at the house with that inward expression, the one that meant he was still sorting. Yes, Sirius said, when you want to. They walked to the end of the street. Behind them, the house stood in its own shadow, quiet and enormous. Somewhere inside, in a locked cabinet off the drawing room, something very old and very dark waited in the dark, as patient as the house itself. Harry had known the letter was coming. Sirius had told him when to expect it, how it would arrive, what it would say. He had told him what each item on the supply list was for, and which ones he'd need immediately, and which ones could wait. Harry had made a list of his own questions, and worked through most of them over the summer, and by the morning of his 11th birthday he was, as far as Sirius could tell, entirely prepared. The flat was different now. 12 Grimmauld Place, which Sirius had finally moved them into in 1989, 2 years after that first visit. It was still cold. It was still full of his family's convictions. But it was also full of Harry's trainers by the door and Remus's books on every available surface. And the smell of something Andromeda had brought, something warm and sweet, which she had set on the kitchen table while she watched Harry open the envelope with the composure of someone opening something expected. Andromeda Tonks had been in Harry's life since he was small enough not to remember the beginning of it. She was Sirius's cousin, the one who had married outside the ideology and been burned off the family tapestry for it, which made her and Sirius natural allies, in the category of black family members who had managed to become decent human beings. She was here now, on the morning of Harry's 11th birthday, watching him read his Hogwarts letter. "Dragonhide gloves," Harry said. "What size do I get?" "I'll find out," Remus said. Sirius went to the kitchen to make tea. He stood at the kettle for longer than making tea required. The sound of Harry and Remus discussing the supply list came through the doorway with the comfortable ease of 10 years of practice, and Sirius stood at the kettle and felt something he could not quite name, not grief, not exactly, more like the particular vertigo of a moment you have been looking forward to for a decade that is now actually happening. Harry was 11. In 1 month he would be at Hogwarts. He would be exactly where he was supposed to be, which was wonderful, and he would be there without Sirius, which was the other thing. The tea finished. They went to Diagon Alley the following week, on a bright August morning that had no business being as cheerful as it was. Harry had his list. He was systematic about these things, Remus's influence. He moved through Flourish and Blots and the Apothecary with the focused efficiency of someone who had allocated a specific amount of time for each purchase and intended to keep to it. People noticed them. Sirius was aware of it from the first moment they came out of the leaky cauldron. The slight pause in conversation, the recognitions, the looks that tracked from him to Harry and back again. He understood what they were seeing. A man who had been publicly accused of mass murder, walking through Diagon Alley with a boy who had James Potter's face. Some of them stared. Some of them were cold, in the way of people who had formed a view and didn't intend to revise it. Harry noticed, but he didn't say anything until that evening when they were back home. People were looking at us, he said. Yes, Sirius said. At you specifically, the way they looked at you was different. Sirius considered how to say it. Some people, he said, believed that if you were imprisoned for something, you must have done it. No one wants to think the system made a mistake. It's easier not to. So some of them still believe I'm guilty, and when they see me, they're looking at the thing they believe. Harry thought about this. Does it bother you? Sometimes, Sirius said. Less than it used to. We know the truth. That's the thing that actually matters. Ollivander's was dim and quiet in the way it always was. Aisles of narrow boxes going back into the dark, the smell of sawdust and something older. The man himself emerged from between the shelves with the particular quality of someone who had been measuring things for a very long time and had opinions about all of them. Harry tried 7 wands. The 8th wand chose him. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. When Harry raised it and gave it a wave, sparks of red and gold came from the tip, and Ollivander went very still. He looked at Harry for a long moment. Then he said, "Very curious." Harry looked at the wand in his hand. "What's curious?" "The phoenix, whose tail feather is in your wand, gave one other feather," Ollivander said. "Just one. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, gave you that scar." The shop was quiet. Harry processed this. Sirius, standing 2 steps behind him, kept his face completely neutral. They talked about it outside in the alley, sitting on a bench while the august crowds moved around them. Voldemort's wand, Harry said. Not a question. He had had the 30 seconds required to work it out. "The same phoenix," Sirius said. "Yes, and mine." "Yes." Harry sat with this. Sirius watched him sit with it. He was looking at the wand in the box on his knee with the expression he got when he was integrating something new into the map. Not afraid, not overwhelmed, just working. "Right," Harry said eventually. "I'll look it up." They went to the broomstick shop because Sirius had to. He could not in good conscience take Harry to Diagon Alley to buy school supplies without at least looking at the broomsticks. He was not made of stone. The Nimbus 2000 was on display, and it was beautiful, and Harry was 11, and Sirius had been waiting a decade to put Harry on a broomstick. The shop assistant told him that first-year students were not permitted personal broomsticks at Hogwarts. There was a pause. "That seems like a rule someone made up for a reason," Sirius said. "Probably," Harry said. The pause continued. The rule stood. They bought the equipment Harry would need for flying class, which was not a broomstick, and Sirius was quietly devastated, and Harry found this deeply funny, and they walked out into the August afternoon, and Harry was still grinning when they got home. The evening before the Hogwarts Express was the 31st of August, and Sirius had been steeling himself for this conversation all week. He sat on the edge of Harry's bed after Harry had finished packing and said, "There's something I want to tell you before you go." Harry sat cross-legged on the trunk he had spent the last hour loading. "All right." "You know why you survived," Sirius said. "When you were 1-year-old, your mother put herself between you and Voldemort. She didn't have to. She chose to. And that act, that choice, created a protection that lives in you. It's in your skin. It's not in a house, or an address, or any specific place. Dumbledore thought he could anchor it at your aunt's house, and that would have worked. But you didn't go there, and it doesn't matter, because the protection isn't about where you sleep. It's what your mother put into you when she chose to die for you. That's yours. You carry it with you." Harry looked at him steadily. "Lily's protection, yes, Sirius." He paused. "I know this. I know you know it," Sirius said. "I needed to say it anyway." Before tomorrow, Harry held his gaze for a moment, then looked at his hands. "Okay," he said quietly. "There was one more thing. Pettigrew," Sirius said. "He's still out there, still a rat, still unaccounted for. He could be anywhere. I've been telling you this for years, and I'll tell you one more time. If you ever encounter a rat that is older than it should be, or that behaves strangely old, for a rat is 3 years, Harry. They don't live much past that. You tell a teacher, and you write to me immediately. Don't investigate. Write to me." "I know," Harry said. "I know you know," Sirius said. "I'm telling you again." He went with Harry to King's Cross on the 1st of September and stood on platform 9 3/4 in the noise and the steam, while Harry said goodbye to Remus and received a brief, ferocious hug from Andromeda, and shook hands with Sirius in a way that started out formal and ended with Sirius pulling him in by the shoulder. "Right," Sirius said. "Obviously," Harry said. He went through the barrier. He didn't hesitate. He had grown up knowing this was real, knowing exactly what it was and where it led. He walked through without breaking his stride, and he was gone, and the crowd closed behind him. Sirius stood on the Muggle side of the barrier in the ordinary noise of King's Cross Station, and felt the particular ache of having done something right and being terrified anyway. Remus appeared at his shoulder. "He's fine," Remus said. "I know," Sirius said. They stood there for a while longer, just in case. Sirius had described the castle as impossible, and standing in the bow of the boat as it rounded the cliff face, Harry decided that was the right word. He had heard about all of it. The castle, the lake, the mountains, the way the whole thing was lit from within, as if the stone itself had decided to be luminous. Sirius had described it with the precision of someone who still saw it clearly after 20 years. Hearing about it was not the same. The lake was black and still in the September evening, and the castle's reflection stretched down into the water, tower lights swaying in it like candle flames. And Harry looked up from the reflection to the real thing and understood for the first time why Sirius's voice had always changed when he talked about coming back to school. He shared his boat with 3 people who had not spoken to him yet. The boy with red hair had nearly knocked him over on the platform, and apologized with the guilty energy of someone who had already managed several embarrassments that day. The girl next to him had been reading something until the castle appeared, and had then closed the book without marking her place, which told Harry something about her. The 4th person, round-faced, holding a small toad. He appeared to be arguing with in an undertone, looked like the castle had knocked something loose in him. They were all looking. Harry looked too, and didn't feel the need to say anything about it. The woman who met them in the entrance hall was Professor McGonagall. Harry knew who she was from Sirius's descriptions: the sharp face, the square spectacles, the tartan sash, the manner of someone who had long ago decided what kind of person to be and had been that person ever since. He was not prepared entirely for the way she looked at him. She was going through her welcome address when her gaze reached him, and it stopped there. Just briefly, a fraction of a second, imperceptible if you weren't watching for it. He was watching for it because he had grown up reading the faces of people who knew things about him that he was only just learning. McGonagall's face, in that fraction of a second, did something complicated. Then it settled. She continued her address without any indication that anything had happened. Later, Harry would understand what she had seen. A boy who was alive and intact, standing in the entrance hall on exactly the night he should have been there, with the composure of a child who had not spent a decade eating loneliness in small increments. She had argued in a Muggle street 10 years ago that the people Dumbledore proposed to send this child to were not people who would love him. Here was the evidence of the alternative. She kept her composure. He could see it cost her something. Ron Weasley introduced himself properly in the antechamber while they waited. He had 7 brothers in wizarding history, apparently. The weight of this was visible. He had also grown up in a household that measured brooms the way some people measured furniture. And when he found out that Harry's guardian was Sirius Black, once rumored Azkaban escapee, later spectacularly acquitted, famous for reasons that had accumulated over a decade. Harry was familiar with this expression. He waited it out. "What's that like?" Ron said. "Normal, from the inside," Harry said. "Weird from other people's reactions," Ron nodded. He seemed to find... "My family's mental too," he said, with what Harry recognized as genuine comfort. Something about Ron Weasley, Harry thought, was going to be reliable in exactly this way. The great hall was enormous and full of the smell of candle wax and something good coming from somewhere, and Harry looked up at the ceiling and understood immediately what he was seeing. The night sky complete, the late summer constellations perfectly rendered in a ceiling that was not there anymore and had been replaced with the thing it was mimicking. The girl from the boat, Hermione Granger, who had already told him her name, with the efficiency of someone who was used to not wasting time, was telling the red-haired boy something in a low voice. The red-haired boy was nodding in a way that suggested he would rather not need to be told. Sirius was right, Harry thought, looking at the hundreds of floating candles and the long tables and the weight of the stone ceiling that was also a sky. Impossible was the right word. The sorting hat was old and frayed and sang a song about the houses that Harry did not entirely follow. And then the sorting began. He waited through the names, watching the hat, until Professor McGonagall said, "Potter, Harry," and he walked to the stool. The hat came down over his eyes. For a moment, there was nothing. Then something else was in his head, not a voice, exactly more like a very concentrated presence, doing what attention does when it is very focused on you. The presence went looking. Harry felt it moving through things, the early memory of Sirius, carrying him through November cold. The flat with its difficult wallpaper, Remus's patient explanations of things Harry had brought home from school with questions attached. The way Sirius had sat on the floor next to his crib in Hogwarts one night and not said anything for a long time, the photograph of his parents on the windowsill. The way he had always known what the scar was, had always known his parents had loved him enough to die for him, had filed this away not as wound, but as fact, as anchor. Unusual, the presence said, not quite in words. A child who has never had to be brave just to endure. You have the courage, and you have the mind, and you have something else, the capacity to put both outward toward others, because you were never required to keep them inward just to survive. "Gryffindor," said the hat, in its actual voice, out loud. "The easiest sorting I have done in years." The Gryffindor table erupted. Harry took the hat off and went to sit down, and Ron appeared next to him almost immediately, having been sorted 3 names later with cheerful efficiency. Hermione joined them. She had gone under the hat for so long that Harry had begun to wonder whether she was having a philosophical dispute with it, and her relief when it finally said Gryffindor was visible and apparently genuine. Neville Longbottom sat under the hat for what seemed like a very long time. He had the expression of someone waiting for a verdict he was not sure of. Harry watched his face and thought about Frank and Alice Longbottom at St. Mungo's, not coming back, alive in a way that was crueler than being dead. Neville had a grandmother who loved him. The hat eventually said Gryffindor, and Neville sat down next to Harry, looking like someone who had passed something close. Draco Malfoy's name was called, and the hat barely touched his head before it said Slytherin. Malfoy took the hat off with the satisfaction of someone who already knew. He had looked at Harry once, when McGonagall read the name Potter with the sharpened attention of a person who had heard that name at home, from a father who had said it with something that was not quite respect and not quite anything else. At the staff table, Harry noticed a man in black robes watching him. Dark eyes, black hair, a face that Harry could see from across the hall was working to remain closed. He had seen a version of that expression before, the look of someone encountering something they were not prepared for. He looked away. The look did not go away. He found out later from a first year, who had heard it from his parents, that the man's name was Severus Snape. Harry stored this and thought about what Sirius had told him once when Harry was 9 and had asked about his mother's school friends, that she had been very close with someone who was now a teacher at Hogwarts, and that it had ended badly, and that grief made people complicated. He looked at the man in black across the hall and understood something about the shape of it. Dumbledore's start-of-term speech went over Harry's head somewhat, partly because he was still processing the ceiling, and partly because Ron was explaining something about how the food was going to appear and was being corrected by Hermione every 30 seconds, which was a dynamic Harry suspected would become familiar. He looked up at the staff table once and found Dumbledore looking at him, the blue eyes very bright behind the half-moon spectacles, something in them that Harry couldn't entirely read. Not worry, quite. Something more like a long thought arriving at its conclusion. Harry looked back at the Gryffindor table and the candles and the friends he had just begun to make and thought, Sirius said, impossible, and Sirius was right. The food arrived. Around him his house erupted into the noise of 200 people who had been traveling since morning, and had earned this, and Harry picked up his fork and began. October settled over Hogwarts with the particular authority of Scottish autumn, which was less a season than a demonstration of what weather could do if it stopped being polite about it. Harry had been at the castle a month. He had not been overwhelmed. This was the difference nobody quite expected, not the teachers who had anticipated a boy discovering magic for the first time, not the students who had braced for someone famous to be difficult about it. Harry had grown up in the wizarding world. He knew what Nearly Headless Nick was before he met him. He knew what moving staircases meant, and had opinions about Peeves before he encountered Peeves. He had arrived at Hogwarts the way you arrive somewhere. You have been told about your whole life, with the specific pleasure of finding it matches. He had also arrived with friends, more or less immediately. Ron Weasley was easy company, quick and loud in the good way, and honest about what he didn't know, which Harry found refreshing in direct proportion to how rare it was. Hermione Granger was thorough in a way that the rest of the year hadn't quite figured out what to do with yet, but Harry had grown up with Remus, and Remus had a similar quality, the kind of rigor that looked like showing off until you needed it, at which point it turned out to just be competence. Neville Longbottom was quieter than either of them, and more likely to look at his shoes when directly addressed, and Harry liked him in the uncomplicated way of people who recognized something in each other that they couldn't articulate and didn't need to. The first potions class was on a Thursday, Sirius had told him about Snape when Harry was 9. Not everything. Harry was not a container for adult grievances, but the facts. Snape had been his mother's childhood friend. They had met as children, been close through most of Hogwarts, and the friendship had broken in their 5th year when Snape said something to Lily that could not be taken back. He had become a Death Eater. He had defected to Dumbledore's side when he learned what the prophecy had put at risk. He was, Sirius had said with a flatness that meant he was working to be fair, one of the reasons Harry's parents had been protected as long as they were. Harry had filed this carefully, the way he filed everything. He walked into the dungeon classroom with it still in his head. The dungeon was cold, even in October, lit by torches that did not entirely compensate for the lack of windows. Jars of pickled things lined the walls. Snape arrived without announcement and stood at the front with the quality of someone who had learned to take up space deliberately, and Harry looked at him and thought, there is the face of someone carrying something very large. Snape's opening questions were precise and rapid, a test designed to find the cracks in a student's preparation. Bezoars, aconite. What you would get if you added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood. Harry knew the answers. He waited for the question to land on him, and when it did, he gave the answer plainly, without color or performance. No arrogance, no flinching. Snape looked at him for a moment after he answered. It was brief enough that Harry might have imagined it, but he didn't think he had. He could see Snape constructing an approach that didn't quite fit. Whatever he had expected, James Potter's son, raised by Sirius Black, arriving in his classroom with a chip on his shoulder the size of a broomstick. The thing in front of him was not that Harry paid attention. He didn't volunteer more than was asked for. When Snape was sharp, Harry received it without flinching, the way he received most things, as information rather than assault. Sirius's household had not been without conflict. Harry knew how to sit in a room where the atmosphere was difficult and not lose his ground. It unsettled Snape. Harry could not have said exactly how he knew this, but he knew it. Neville's cauldron began to melt somewhere in the second half of the class. The bottom sagged and went slightly translucent, and Neville stared at it with the expression of someone watching an inevitable disaster they have not been able to prevent. Snape was at the far end of the dungeon. Harry leaned over, fixed the mix ratio while it was still salvageable, added the right amount of the counter-agent, and straightened up again before Snape turned around. Neville looked at him later. Harry said quietly. Later meant, I know what this class does to you. Because I know what happened to your parents, and what happened to your parents is the kind of thing that means potions is harder, when someone in authority wants you to fail, and I have enough ground to stand on to share some of it. He didn't say any of that. He didn't need to. They shared a category, 2 boys, whose first year of life included a night that had been the end of something, and some categories are enough of a language. Neville nodded and went back to his cauldron. The letter from Sirius arrived on a Thursday evening, carried by the large grey owl they had bought the summer before. It came with 3 detachable pages and a small burn mark on one corner, where Sirius had apparently set something down on the kitchen table, before he meant to. Harry read it in the dormitory, while Ron slept and the fire made the room feel smaller than it was. The news was this: the Ministry's search for Pettigrew had gone cold. He had been tracked by methods Sirius did not detail to somewhere in the Scottish Highlands. After that, nothing. Aurors believed he had transformed had gone back to the rat, and was living in someone's household, possibly a wizarding family, possibly Muggle, somewhere he could hide indefinitely as a pet or a stowaway. He could stay that way for years if he chose. Rats didn't generally live past 3 or so, Pettigrew had been alive, in that form, for a decade. He was very good at staying small and invisible and believed dead. Harry read this twice. Then he put the letter down and looked slowly around the dormitory. No rats. He knew his dorm mates' trunks. He knew what they kept. He had been paying attention since September. In the quiet, systematic way, Sirius had taught him to pay attention to things that mattered. Not obsessively, not in a way that would make the ordinary impossible, but as a permanent, low-level awareness in the background of everything else. He was 11 years old. He had been told at 8, in the careful, even voice Sirius used for things that were real and serious. Somewhere out there is a man who can become a rat, who helped people murder your parents, who is very likely still alive, and you should always know what rats are nearby, and how old they are, and whether they behave strangely. He had carried this for 3 years. He would carry it longer. He pulled out parchment and his quill and wrote back. He told Sirius about potions, 2 full paragraphs including the part about Snape's questions, and the part about Neville's cauldron, and the part about how the dungeon smelled, which he thought Sirius would find either funny or nostalgic. He told him, Hermione knows every spell in the textbook already. Ron loses at chess on purpose sometimes, so she'll stop being nervous about it. The castle is exactly as impossible as described. Then, because Sirius would want to know, and would not ask directly, I'll keep watching. He folded the letter and set it aside for the owl to take in the morning. Outside the dormitory windows, the Scottish night was complete and cold and very dark, the way it only got out here away from cities, the kind of dark where the stars were actually visible rather than implied. Harry sat with his hands on his knees and thought about his parents and Peter Pettigrew and a man in a potions classroom who could not quite decide what to do with him. And then he went to sleep, because he was 11 and he had transfiguration at 8 in the morning, and he had learned growing up with Sirius that you did not let the serious things eat all the ordinary time. The 31st of October was Halloween for everyone else. Harry had always known this. He had also always known that the 31st of October was the anniversary of the night James and Lily Potter were murdered at Godric's Hollow, and that these 2 facts existed in the same date, the way 2 different things could share a container without becoming each other. He had learned to hold them both. He had been holding them both, in one form or another, since he was old enough to understand calendars. The owl arrived before breakfast, while Ron was still making a determined effort to stay asleep, and Neville was reading something at the foot of his bed. The letter was from Sirius, written quickly on 2 pages, the handwriting large and slightly crowded the way it always was when he was putting effort into appearing casual. Sirius wrote every year on this day. Harry had every letter kept in a box under his bed at Grimmauld Place. He could have recited them. Each one was different in the particulars, what was happening, how things stood, what Sirius wanted Harry to know about how the year had gone, and each one was the same at the end, James's name and Lily's name and 1 sentence from each of them that Sirius had kept, that Harry would not hear from anyone else. This year from James, something he had said in their 6th year, sitting on the astronomy tower when anyone with sense would have been in bed. I would rather make 1 real friend than 20 useful ones. The kind of thing James said when he wasn't watching himself. Sirius had remembered it for 25 years. From Lily. Something she had said at an Order of the Phoenix meeting when they were all running short on optimism. We don't have to be sure we can win. We have to be sure. Harry folded the letter with the care he always used for these, aware that the sentences at the end were the only record of his parents speaking that he would ever have, and put it in his trunk and went down to breakfast. He sat with Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table and ate. He was sad in a way that had texture to it, but did not require withdrawal. Sad The way you could be when sadness had been part of the house you grew up in, rather than a foreign country you were suddenly sent to. He had always known the 31st of October was coming. He had always known what it was. The grief was real, and it was his. And it coexisted the way Sirius had always shown him it could. With scrambled eggs and Halloween decorations and Hermione asking Ron why he had taken 3 bread rolls when he clearly only wanted 2. "Solidarity," Ron said. "That's not what solidarity means," Hermione said. "It is the way I'm using it," Ron said. Harry listened to this and found himself, despite everything, glad to be here. The feast that evening was lit gold and purple. Bats circling the enchanted ceiling, carved pumpkins enormous along the staff table. Harry sat between Ron and Hermione and ate more than he expected to. He was thinking about Sirius, on the motorbike somewhere over the Scottish moors, going too fast the way he did when the date pressed on him and he had no one to be held together by. He would be all right. Harry knew what the 31st of October cost the people who had been there, and he thought about Sirius going too fast in the cold dark, and hoped the drive helped. Professor Quirrell came through the doors of the great hall at a run. He was a young man, slight, in a purple turban he wore through all weathers and all circumstances, and his stammer was usually part of his presence in a classroom, a hesitation, a search, a man who seemed to be perpetually working out whether he meant to say the thing he was saying. Right now, there was no stammer. He said it clearly. There was a mountain troll in the castle, in the dungeons, and he said it in the voice of someone who had personally encountered the troll and wished not to repeat the experience. And then he appeared to lose consciousness briefly against the doorframe. The hall erupted. Dumbledore's voice cut through the noise. He sent the students to their dormitories by house with prefects, and the teachers moved with the directed purpose of people who had emergency protocols and were using them. Harry and Ron moved with the Gryffindors to the stairs. It was Ron who said it first. "Where's Hermione?" They both stopped. She had been upset at lunch. Harry had seen her face when something Draco Malfoy said across the hall reached her, had seen her look down and not look up again. Ron had the expression of a person rapidly working out whether the thing he should have said sooner was the thing that was relevant right now. "She doesn't know about the troll," Harry said. They turned around. The girls' bathroom on the 2nd floor smelled of damp stone and lavender, and it also now smelled of something large and animal and wrong. The troll was enormous. 12 feet, if it was an inch, grey and crusted, with a club the size of a small tree, moving through the cubicles with the patience of something that did not need to be anywhere specific, and was content to break things while it waited to arrive. Hermione was in the far corner. Harry did not stop to make a plan. He went at the troll from the side, while Ron shouted from the doorway. The troll turned toward the noise, and Harry scrambled up to the sink and got his wand out, the club swinging toward his head, the spell connecting with the troll's wrist, the grip loosening. The club clattering down, and then he was on the floor, and Ron had hit it with the heaviest knockback jinx a first year had managed that term, and the troll went into the wall and sat down and stayed down. Then Hermione made a sound. Then the teachers arrived. McGonagall arrived first, with Snape a step behind her, and she looked at the troll against the wall and the 3 first years on the floor and said, in a voice of controlled disbelief, "Explain." Hermione spoke first. She said she had gone looking for the troll herself. She had read about them, thought she could manage it, knew it was foolish, was sorry, and Harry and Ron had come to help when they realized where she was. Harry understood exactly what she was doing. He did not correct her. Neither did Ron. McGonagall took 5 points each from Harry and Ron for being out of their dormitories, and gave Hermione a look that said considerably more than 5 points could cover. Then they were sent to bed. In the corridor, Hermione walked beside Harry. "You didn't have to do that," Harry said. "You came back," she said. "I wasn't going to let you get in trouble for it." Harry looked at her. "For what it's worth, I think you're the cleverest person in our year." "That's not accurate," she said, but she said it quietly, like she wanted him to argue. "Might be accurate for potions," Ron said from behind them, and that was when Harry knew this was going to be all right. The three of them, this particular configuration of people who had agreed to something without discussing it. After Hermione went to the girls' dormitory, and Ron went upstairs, Harry found a window seat in the corridor and sat in it for a while. Not grieving. He had done that quietly, throughout the day. The castle grounds were dark, and the mountains were darker shapes against the dark sky. And somewhere beyond all of it was Scotland, with its moors and its October cold. Neville appeared from the direction of the stairs and stopped when he saw Harry. "Sorry," Neville said. "I wasn't—" "Sit down," Harry said. Neville sat. He was quiet for a moment, looking out the window. "My parents' anniversary isn't a date," Neville said eventually. "They're still alive, so it doesn't work like that for me." "No," Harry said. "But Halloween is—" He stopped. "It was in November." He said this carefully, as if the words were handles he wasn't quite sure how to hold so. Harry said. They sat in the dark for a while, two boys with adjacent losses, not performing anything for each other, not required to. Later, Harry went back to the dormitory and got out his parchment. The fire had burned to embers. Ron was asleep. 10 years today, he wrote. "I keep thinking about what you always say, that they knew what they were doing, that it was a choice they made with their eyes open. I think I understand that a bit better than I did last year." He paused. He looked at the embers. "I miss them. Is it allowed to miss people I never knew?" He folded it. He would send it in the morning. He lay down in the dark and listened to the wind against the tower windows and thought, 10th year, he had made it through. Tomorrow was November. The house smelled of old magic and stone, and something Sirius had attempted to remedy with pine and candles, with partial success. 12 Grimold Place in December was cold, in the way of houses that have not been properly heated in a very long time, and are not in a hurry to warm up. Sirius had moved in properly the previous spring, not because he had stopped having complicated feelings about it, but because Remus had pointed out that Harry would eventually need a proper home and the flat's dimensions were becoming an honest problem. He had cleared 3 rooms, put decent fires in 2 of them, and painted over the hallway at some point in October, which had not improved it as much as he'd hoped, but had been the action of a man who intended to stay. Remus was in the kitchen when Harry arrived, having apparently taken on the cooking as a faute accompli. Andromeda was in the sitting room, which Sirius had cleared enough to make livable. She and Sirius were not talking about the house in the careful, specific way of 2 people who have agreed not to talk about something. Harry recognized this technique. He had grown up in a household that did it every full moon, with the same particular quality of deliberate normalcy. He put his trunk upstairs and came back down and went looking for Creature. The elf was in the drawing room when Harry found him, dusting the cabinet that held the Black family heirlooms with an expression of absorbed grief. He had been doing this for 12 years. He would do it for 12 more, if left to his own authority. "Hello," Harry said. Creature looked at him. The red-rimmed eyes assessed him with the attention of someone who had learned not to expect politeness and did not know what to do with it when it arrived. "Master Harry," Creature said, in a voice that made this an observation rather than a greeting. "Merry Christmas," Harry said. Kreacher did not say it back. He returned to the cabinet, but something in the set of his ears, which were large and bat-like, shifted slightly. Harry registered this and went back to the kitchen, where Remus handed him a mug of something hot without being asked. On the afternoon of Christmas Eve, Harry went upstairs to Regulus's room. He was 11 now, not 7. He understood more about what Regulus had been, about what he had done, about the document that had saved Sirius, and what it had cost to write it. Sirius had been filling in the story for years in small increments, the way he filled in everything in pieces, sized for Harry to carry. He looked at the writing case, still on the desk. He looked at the bookshelf and the calendar still open to August 1979. And then he looked at the wardrobe. He opened it. Old robes, dark fabric, a smell of cedar, and something damp. On the wardrobe floor, pushed to the back. He picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Inside the locket, he knew it immediately, the way you know something when you have the context for it. Green and gold, a serpentine S, inlaid in emerald, the kind of object made to hold the attention and not release it. He picked it up. The weight of it was wrong, not the weight of metal, which was just metal, but some other kind of weight that sat in the hand and pressed at the edges of something he didn't have a name for. He was 11, and he had been told about Horcruxes at Christmas, and standing in a cold room in his dead uncle's wardrobe, he understood, in his skin, what the name was for. He carried it downstairs. Sirius was in the sitting room. He looked at the locket, and his face changed. "Where was it?" he said. "Regulus's wardrobe, in a tin box at the back." Sirius looked at it for a moment longer. Then he said, "Kreacher." Kreacher appeared in the doorway. "Where did this come from?" Sirius said. "You are commanded to answer." Something broke open in Kreacher's face, not the facade, but the thing underneath which had been kept in the same tin box as the locket for 12 years, he answered. He answered in the voice of someone who has been carrying an enormous weight and has finally been asked to put it down. He told them what Regulus had done. He told them about the cave. Voldemort had needed a house elf to test the protection on the basin, and Regulus had sent Kreacher, and Kreacher had been left there to die. He had managed to disapparate house elf magic, which did not obey Voldemort's enchantments, and he had come home, and a year later Regulus had told him to take him back. In the cave, it was Regulus who drank the potion, not Kreacher. Regulus had gone through the whole basin himself, and retrieved the real locket, and replaced it with a fake containing a note. And then he had told Kreacher to take the locket home and find a way to destroy it, and never to tell Voldemort what he had done, and never to tell anyone. Kreacher had gone. Regulus had not followed him. The Inferi in the lake had pulled him down. He was 17 years old, and he had known, when he commanded Kreacher to leave, that he was not leaving too. Kreacher had tried to destroy the locket for 12 years. He had not succeeded. Nothing he did to it left a mark. The room was very quiet when Kreacher finished. Sirius was looking at his hands. He and Regulus had not been close. Regulus was the obedient black son, the one who stayed and joined and believed. He had called Sirius a blood traitor when Sirius left at 16. And then, alone at 17, without telling anyone and without knowing if it would matter, he had walked into a cave and done the one thing he could think of to damage Voldemort's grip on life, and told no one. He was on our side at the end, Sirius said. Not to anyone. He said it the way you say something you have just understood for the first time. Harry sat next to him. He did not say anything. Sometimes sitting next to someone was the whole thing. Dumbledore came on Christmas morning, before the presents. Sirius had sent for him the night before. He looked at the locket for a long time. He was not surprised. He said, "This is a Horcrux." He explained it to Harry directly. Sirius had asked him to, and Dumbledore, who had learned things about what Harry could carry, obliged. A Horcrux was a container for a piece of a human soul, created by an act of murder and dark magic. To make one was to tear the soul in half and preserve a fragment of yourself in an object. While any of the objects survived, he survived. He said this matter-of-factly, the way adults spoke to Harry when they had stopped managing what he was allowed to know. "Can it be destroyed?" Harry asked. "By methods that inflict damage that cannot be repaired. Basilisk venom, find fire, the sword of Gryffindor, which has been imbued with basilisk venom through a goblin forging process. We do not have access to any of these tonight." He paused. "I will take the locket. It will be stored securely. This is not a solution, but it is a beginning." He took the locket, which seemed to resist being placed in the velvet bag he produced, and left before lunch. Sirius said, "There's something else I need to tell you." He had the particular stillness he got when he was about to say something that cost him something to say, about you and the locket, about why you felt something when you held it. He told Harry about the accidental Horcrux, the rebounding killing curse, the piece of Voldemort's soul that had latched onto the nearest living thing rather than dispersing. The thing Harry had been carrying in his scar since he was 1 year old. Harry processed this, the way he processed most things. Sirius told him, quietly, carefully, sitting still. He looked at his hands. He thought about the weight of the locket and the weight he carried without knowing it, and whether those two weights felt the same. He thought they might. "Does it have to be destroyed?" he asked. Sirius looked at him. "I don't know yet," he said. "Dumbledore doesn't know yet. There may be a way." He paused. "Harry, I'm all right," Harry said. "I just want to know the real answer." "When we have it," Sirius said, "you'll have it first." He believed this. He had always believed it. In the house where Regulus Black had died for something, at Christmas, 11 years old and carrying more than he should have to, Harry believed that the real answer would be given to him when it existed, and that was enough to go on with. They opened the presents after lunch. The house was cold and dark, and enormous around them. It was, despite everything, a good Christmas. January came into Hogwarts, like a door closing. Harry came back to it with two things he had not had before the Christmas holidays: the knowledge of what the locket was, and the knowledge of what he was. He carried them the way Sirius had always taught him to carry hard things, not performing them, not suppressing them, but present with them, the way you stay present with something that cannot be changed. He had told Ron and Hermione something about it because he had grown up in a house where honesty was what you did with people you trusted, and he trusted them. He had not told them everything. Some of the everything was not yet his to say. Hermione had asked 3 precise questions and then said, right in the voice she used, when commitment preceded full integration. Ron had said, "That's properly terrible." And Harry had said yes, and that had been, in the way of the 3 of them, more or less enough. Professor Quirrell taught defense against the dark arts in the manner of someone perpetually nervous about the subject he taught. The classroom smelled of garlic. He wore his purple turban always, indoors and out. His stammer arrived and departed at intervals that did not quite map onto what he was saying. A Tuesday in February, Quirrell walked past Harry in the corridor, and Harry's scar registered something, not pain, a faint prickling, the sensation of something recognizing something else. He had been told at Christmas that the scar contained a piece of Voldemort's soul. When his scar prickled near Quirrell, his first thought was, the Horcrux responding to something. His second thought arrived harder, and he looked at it for a moment, and then filed it. He did not mention it yet. Hagrid let something slip on a Saturday in March. Harry and Hermione had gone down to Hagrid's hut on a Saturday, their boots near the fire, mugs of something herbal and warm. Hagrid had been talking about creatures, with his habitual enthusiasm when he mentioned in passing the three-headed dog he was looking after. "Fluffy," he said, and then stopped. He looked at Harry with the expression of a man watching himself make a mistake in real time. "I shouldn't have said that." "Said what?" Harry said, keeping his face neutral. "Nothing," Hagrid said, with the conviction of someone who had already said it. Walking back to the castle, Harry said, "Third floor, forbidden corridor, three-headed dog." Hermione said nothing. By the time they reached the entrance hall, her direction had changed toward the library. He knew about Fluffy from the start of term. The wrong door, Filch, the dog. The door closed again before anything irreversible. He had been treating the third floor as a fact of the castle. He understood now it was a fact of something specific being kept here, something someone was trying to reach. 3 evenings in the library, Hermione worked. Harry and Ron read what she put in front of them. The Philosopher's Stone. Nicholas Flamel, 665 years old, whose stone produced the elixir of life and turned metal to gold. Hermione had found his name in August in an alchemy footnote, because Hermione had read everything in August. The stone had been in Vault 713 at Gringotts. Harry remembered Hagrid collecting a grubby package from that vault the day they went to Diagon Alley, and the attempted robbery reported shortly after. The stone had been moved to Hogwarts, hidden under 7 layers of defense, contributed by 7 teachers, and someone was trying to get through those defenses. Fluffy, put to sleep by music, Hagrid had said before he stopped himself. Devil's snare below that. It hated fire and light. A room of winged keys needed a broom, a life-size chess set, then a troll, apparently already knocked out by whoever had been through before them. Snape's contribution, a logic puzzle in potions bottles, and then Dumbledore's final enchantment, still unknown from where they stood. But Harry kept returning to the troll. Quirrell had set the Halloween troll loose. They had always assumed it was a diversion, and it had been a diversion. But from what? Quirrell's contribution to the stone's defenses was a mountain troll. The Halloween troll had been used as a diversion on the night someone tried to breach the stone. Quirrell was both the diversion and the defense, which meant he was simultaneously protecting the stone and trying to reach it past his own protection of it. Harry said this to Ron and Hermione. There was a pause. "He's working for Voldemort," Ron said. Hermione winced at the name but did not correct the conclusion. The scar had prickled near Quirrell. Harry had assumed the Horcrux in his scar was responding to something, to proximity to a Death Eater, to someone loyal to the dark. He thought about his second thought, the one he had not finished, and finished it now, not a Death Eater. Not someone loyal, someone who had Voldemort with him. He went to Dumbledore. He told him what they had worked out clearly in order, leaving out only the scar's reaction near Quirrell. Dumbledore listened without interrupting. When Harry finished, there was a silence with the quality of something being confirmed. "You have reasoned correctly," Dumbledore said. "So, Quirrell is—" "I have arrangements in place." Not quite a satisfying answer. But Dumbledore was not going to elaborate, and Harry was 11. He said, "All right," and left. On his way back through the corridor outside Dumbledore's office, he nearly walked into Snape. Snape was not where teachers usually were on a Saturday afternoon, which meant he was specifically here, which meant something. He looked at Harry with the closed expression he always wore, the one Harry had been reading for 7 months, and then he said something Harry had not expected. "Trust what you notice," Snape said. "When something about a person seems wrong to you, and you cannot articulate why, that is not a failure of thinking. It is a form of thinking." He paused. "Your mother noticed things about people that other people missed." It was. He stopped. It was useful, he said. Harry stood in the corridor and looked at him. "That's all," Snape said in his ordinary voice, and walked away. Harry stood there for another moment and thought about Lily, and about what it meant to be told he had something of hers in him by the person in this school who had known her best and had the most complicated feelings about having known her. He filed this too. Some things needed time before they became clear. He sent the letter to Sirius that eve. He kept it brief. He had learned from Sirius that some information was better, not said in owl post, because owls could be intercepted and certain words attracted attention from the wrong places. "I think something is happening at school," he wrote. "I'm watching it. I'm not going to do anything stupid." The reply came the next morning in Sirius's large, crowded handwriting. "Define stupid. Below that, tell Dumbledore. I mean it." Below that, be careful. Harry read it 3 times. He tucked it into his pocket and went down to breakfast where Ron was eating with the systematic commitment of someone fueling for the day, and Hermione was reading something that was probably not a textbook, and the Great Hall was loud and bright and ordinary. Whatever was coming, it was coming through the defenses that Dumbledore had built with 7 teachers and considerable trust in his own systems. Harry thought about how Dumbledore had once wanted to place him in Surrey for the same reason. Place the valuable thing where the attack will be identifiable before it succeeds. Trust the arrangement to hold. Dumbledore's confidence in his arrangements was very large. It had always been very large. This was either a great strength or a great vulnerability, and Harry was not sure yet which it was in this particular case. Ron was systematically working through everything in reach. Hermione was reading something she would later deploy in an argument. The Great Hall was loud and ordinary and warm. He was watching, he had told Dumbledore. There was nothing more to do yet, but wait for the moment when watching became insufficient, and trust that when it did, he would know. He was, he thought, his parents' child. In that, they had always known when to stop watching and act. He had grown up on stories of them. He would not forget those stories when he needed them. The harp was still playing when they went through the trapdoor. Hermione had enchanted it to play itself. Hagrid had told them, without meaning to, that music put Fluffy to sleep, and the 3-headed dog had been down already when they reached the corridor. 3 sets of jaws loose, massive sides rising and falling. They'd pulled the ring and dropped. Devil's snare. Hermione lit a bluebell flame, and they fell through. A room of winged keys. Harry took the broom, waiting against the wall, and found the right key in the dark, by the crumple of one wing, silver glinting, still trying to fly straight. The lock opened. The chess set looked at them, with the patience of something that had been waiting for opponents. Ron had understood it the moment he saw it. He moved them through piece by piece, positioning himself as a knight, and when the moment came, he said, "Checkmate is on your left. Go." And the queen moved, and he went down, and stayed down. Hermione went back for help. Harry went forward, alone. Past the troll, already unconscious, Quirrell's own contribution, the same gift as Halloween, through Snape's potions puzzle that Hermione had solved and mapped before she turned back. He drank the correct bottle, which tasted of ice and nothing, and walked through black fire into the final chamber. The mirror was already there. It was enormous, taller than the arched ceiling had any business allowing, gilded frame, carved with figures that moved slightly when the light caught them, its glass dark and deep in the torchlight. The inscription around its frame was the wrong direction to read at first, and then resolved, not your face, your heart's desire. Harry stood in front of it. The figure in the glass was himself, 11 years old, in the chamber's low light. And then it was not only himself. Beside him, a man with dark hair badly in need of cutting and eyes behind glasses, the specific posture of someone accustomed to movement, who looked at Harry the way people looked at things they would protect with everything they had, and a woman with dark red hair and green eyes, his eyes, which meant she was where his eyes had come from, and she was smiling the way people smiled when they meant it, without thinking about meaning it. And Sirius was there too, not present Sirius, not the Sirius who was always slightly underneath a weight he carried at all hours, but some earlier version of him, the one who had not yet had to hold everything together alone, who was laughing at something someone had just said. A complete family, the family that couldn't exist. The mirror showed it to him with the clarity of something it knew he wanted and knew he would stay for. Harry looked at it for a long moment. He had grown up with their names, like touchstones. James, who had stood in the hallway at Godric's Hollow without his wand because he'd set it down, who had bought Sirius 1 more minute to get Harry out. Lily, who had been told to step aside, and had said no, who had put her choice into her son's skin and made it permanent. He had grown up knowing exactly who they were and exactly what they had done. He had carried this not as a wound, but as a foundation. He did not need the mirror to know them. He stepped back. Something moved in his pocket. Warm and solid and real. He reached in and his fingers closed around a smooth stone, small enough to fit in a closed fist, and he understood immediately that Dumbledore's enchantment had done what it was made to do. He had wanted to find it and protect it. Not use it, only that. He was still looking at the stone in his hand when Quirrell stepped out of the shadows. Quirrell stepped out of the shadows without his stammer, without the performance of nervousness. He looked at Harry and at the stone, and his expression was the expression of someone who had stopped pretending. "Give it to me," Quirrell said. Harry closed his hand around the stone. Quirrell unwrapped the turban. The face, on the back of his head, was grey. Barely a face, the shape of features without their substance. Red eyes that had not been human in a very long time. Harry was not surprised. He had known about the disembodied state, about the Horcruxes, and what they meant. He had carried this since Christmas. He was not surprised, and he was afraid. "You have something that belongs to me," Voldemort said, from both mouths at once. "It doesn't," Harry said. Steadier than he felt, Quirrell moved. He was faster than expected. He reached for Harry's closed fist with both hands, and his fingers closed around Harry's wrist. And then he stopped. His face changed. He looked at his hands with the expression of someone experiencing something they had not prepared for. Blisters were forming. Harry could see them rising on Quirrell's palms and fingers, the flesh reddening and then whitening, and Quirrell made a sound and tried to let go. Lily's protection activated without a word or a gesture. It was in Harry's skin, not performed, not directed. It was there because she had put it there when she was 21 years old and had chosen to stand between her child and death. And it had lived in him ever since, unhoused, unanchored, asking nothing of any address. Quirrell tried to hold on. The burning got worse. Voldemort's voice said, "His face. Seize him." Harry heard it and moved before Quirrell could, stepping forward instead of back, bringing both hands up to Quirrell's face, pressing his palms to the grey and hissing skin. Holding, Quirrell screamed. The burning was complete and terrible, and Harry felt it too. A burning in his scar that went all the way through, a sensation of something recognizing itself and failing to tolerate the contact. He did not let go. He pressed harder and kept pressing, eyes shut, feeling Quirrell's hands scrabbling at his arms and then weakening, feeling the resistance fail, feeling the moment when Quirrell's body, borrowed, shared, no longer able to sustain the contradiction of what it was hosting. There was a sound, a rush of cold through the room, as if something had passed through him at speed and taken the warmth with it. Harry went down. He lay on the stone floor. The stone was still in his closed fist. He was not unconscious, nearly, and he lay still and thought about James in the hallway at Godric's Hollow, setting his wand down, buying a minute about Lily, saying no when she was told to step aside. They had known what they were choosing. He had grown up inside that knowledge, learning it in installments from Sirius, who had always given him the real version. The story was not his burden, it was his inheritance. He was in the hospital wing when he woke up properly, and Dumbledore was there. Dumbledore sat by his bed with the expression of a man who had spent several hours with a very large thought. Harry sat up. His hands were intact. The stone was gone, Dumbledore's keeping presumably, and probably correct. "You knew," Dumbledore said. "What protected you before you went down there?" "Sirius told me," Harry said, "that it wasn't about where I lived, that it was in me." A silence. Dumbledore looked at his hands. "He was right, too," Dumbledore said, without qualification. No concession held in reserve, no footnote. He was right, too. Sirius arrived the following morning. He had come the moment Harry's letter reached him, short and oblique and Sirius-trained. The exact minimum information required to convey that something had happened, and Harry was all right. He came into the hospital wing and looked at Harry, and then sat down beside his bed, and he did not say anything for a long time. And then he put his hand on the top of Harry's head, in the way he had since Harry was 14 months old. Harry let him. They sat like that for a while. Harry was fine. Harry was completely fine. Sirius could not stop touching the top of his head. The Hogwarts Express ran south through the green and the sun, Harry and Ron and Hermione in their compartment, and Harry watched the countryside and thought about where he was going. Not a cupboard. Not a house where he was a burden to people who resented magic. He was going back to Sirius and to 12 Grimmauld Place, with its cold and its history, and to Remus's monthly absences and returns, and to Kreacher, and to the ongoing search for Pettigrew, and to the locket that Dumbledore had taken, and to the thing in his scar that no one knew what to do with yet, and that would need an answer eventually. None of it was resolved. But he had faced Voldemort and understood what had protected him. Not a house, not a blood tie, just love, given with intention, given the way Lily had given it, once and permanently, because she had believed it was worth giving,